Hi, and welcome to Homefront, a half-hour conversation about our favorite place, the home. I'm Alicia Blaisdell-Bannon, managing editor of the Cape Cod Times. Joining me, as always, Melanie Lowers, editor of the health, fitness, books, and travel sections at the Times, and Gwen Friss, feature writer and editor of the food section. We wanted to briefly go back for one moment in time, if we can, to our conversation last week about lists. I'm sure you've all spent this past week doing to-do lists and deciding how you were actually going to, productively spend your time. But Melanie has found a cheating way to do it. So show us what you got.
I'm good at that.
I know. Let's see it.
Well, I said last week, I had mentioned that I had seen this little book when I was out shopping, and it's called, I went back and looked for it because I had to get a book. It's called Books to Check Out, a journal. And it's very small. It's pocketbook size, although I like it, so I probably won't put it in my pocketbook. And on the front of it, it looks like the back page checkout for the library. It's all date stamps and stuff. But on the inside, it's really cute. It offers you a place to put books that you want to read, which is always my problem. People tell me about books, and I forget. It also has, and that's pretty long, then it also has a section on favorite books and passages, which I don't know if I have time to do something like that.
See that filled out right away.
I'm going to write down all the things I like.
It was the best of times.
It is.
It was the worst of times.
And then the third section is books borrowed or lent, which I kind of like that because I have this loose association with at least 100 people with books going all over the place, and I never know who's got my books, and a lot of times I don't remember who I got books from. I'll actually bring them around and say, did you give me this? Did you give me this? And so I went out for it. It was $10.95, and so I thought, well, I'll try it. And maybe by the end of the year I will have succeeded, and maybe I won't have succeeded. But in the inside cover, there's a quote from Bertrand Russell that we were just laughing about here for a second. There are two motives for reading a book. One, that you enjoy it. The other, that you can boast about it. And I think for those of us of a certain age, you want to say, oh, I read this great book. It's and so this little thing, and you can go right in and find the title and author.
I would argue it's not just age, though. It's simply the fact that people do so much.
That's right.
Fine.
That's right.
So you say,
You're
whoever
right.
you are.
You're right. So anyway, that was a $10.95 little change to my life. That,
good way to organize.
We'll see how that works.
I have to tell you that since we did that show, everyone's come up to me to say, I do lists.
I know.
Yeah, it's like a confession. Maybe it's like a cult, a list cult.
And I've had to decline and say, no, lists are more personal. You can
please.
do lists.
No. Well, one of the great things about being a parent, if we can wax parental here for a moment, is that you get to go through these phases with your children, and then you get beyond them, and then you get to look back and say, ha ha, to other people who are now going through them. I remember this distinctly when my kids got out of junior high, thinking, good, done and done, and then watching the next group of parents behind me suffering as their children became 12 and 13, and they had to worry about the button on their phone that indicated that the guidance counselor was calling, and you had to deal with something right away. So I was happy to get through it, and happy to move on to the next phase, which shortly after junior high becomes they're in high school, and now they have to start thinking about college. So for all of you who are now facing that period in your life where you're trying to help your kids decide about which college to attend and how to apply for financial aid, I have this to say, ha ha, I've been through it. But Gwen, you have brought someone who can help us through this maze, so please.
Well, I'm not feeling really great about you right now because I'm the person who is, myself and our colleague Kathy Driscoll, we are all looking to get people into college now, so stop with your okay, enough goofing off. We reached out and we decided that one thing we could really do would be to bring someone in who can help us with this, and heaven knows that's what we need is help. So I'd like to introduce everyone to Jody Conway of West Barnstable. And Jody is a retired financial aid director. She worked in financial aid for, is this possible, 26 years?
Yes.
No way.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Wow.
She was a child financial aid person.
And she now has a private business where she helps parents and students to fill out the forms that are required for financial aid.
Great.
And I asked her, because she also does presentations at local high schools, and they run like an hour and a half, and I said, okay, well, what can you give me in 12 to 15 minutes? And she was kind enough to winnow and to hit the high points and to look at the desperation now that you can see me face to face. And the first thing you told me on the phone, which sent me panicking to the computer, was, no, you don't have to wait for the W-2s, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that misconception, because that was certainly true for me. I didn't realize you could start as early and estimate, as you told me, you could start a lot earlier than before your W-2s come.
That's right. I mean, that's absolutely true. In fact, many colleges, their financial aid deadlines for many private schools is February 1st. So if you wait until your W-2s come through, you're not going to be able to get the forms filled out on time.
Oh dear.
What many people do, in fact, if I meet with people in December or even as early as November, is we use their most recent pay stub. In this case, it would be for 2007, and you estimate your income for 2007 using those documents. And then what's nice about this process is that all of these forms can be corrected at a later date. So the most important thing is to have them done and processed by the school's posted financial aid deadlines. Everything can be corrected after the fact once the taxes are filed and so on and so forth, but you do not want to wait until those W-2s come out. It would be too late at that point for many colleges.
You guys at home might see me taking notes.
Oh, man.
And I want to mention that since you don't have Jody, and thankfully we do right now, that her information, the high points of this conversation, will be posted on our landings page. So if you want to take notes at home, you can, but you don't have to. I'm doing it for you. The reporter in me is taking notes, and the mother in me is trying to breathe. Okay, so don't fall off the chair. I obviously have a senior who's applied to 4 schools. So.
Yeah. I think what parents really need to be doing right now is to go on to the websites for each of the colleges and make sure that they know the deadlines for each of the colleges' financial aid forms. And once you have a sense of that, you know when you need to get these forms filled out. And that really needs to be done at this point in time right away. And that's something that needs to be done. And then after that, there is one form that everybody is required to fill out, and that's called a FAFSA form. And that will be posted on the website for how to obtain that form. So everybody needs to fill that out, and to do that online you also need to complete or to apply for federal PIN numbers. And the website to do that is also on a flyer that I believe will be posted online. And those PIN numbers basically allow you to enter your data online. It serves as an electronic signature, but you must have that to process the form. And then there are many private colleges that require what's called a profile application.
Right.
And that is to determine eligibility for their own funding, for the institutional funding. So potentially there are those 2 forms that everybody needs to complete. And the college's websites will say, will indicate whether they want the FAFSA, the profile, or both. So it's very important just to check on every website to see what the application requirements are.
Now, let me ask you, the financial aid deadline varies somewhat from college to college.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's this sounds like a stupid question, but it's different than the application deadline.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, the admissions deadlines are typically, you know, some of them are December 1st, January 1st, February 1st, but financial aid deadlines, some schools want the forms by the 15th of January, and they really go from there, the January 15th, February 1st, the 15th, and so on. So the application deadline for admission is different from the financial aid deadline. So you need to make sure you have the 2.
And I assume that if you miss that deadline, that you might be missing out on some aid that you might have gotten otherwise.
Absolutely. What the colleges tend to do is forms that are received on time are awarded at that point. Anything that's received after the deadline date is awarded funds that are available after they've already funded everybody who came in as an on-time application. So 1 or 2 days could make the difference.
And can you file all of this online now, or is it a matter of printing out the forms and filling them out?
Both forms can be done online. In fact, they should be, because when you file them online, when you click submit, that's the receipt date for that application. So conceivably, if you are running late and you have a February 1st deadline, if you enter that date of February 1st and send it, it has a receipt date of February 1st. But if you mail it, you really don't know when the receipt date will be posted.
That's great. So that should be done
online is the way to go.
So
yes.
Now we are going to have the web addresses up on our landings page, but is there one? We were talking on the phone, I think you mentioned, I know that one of the places you need to go to is the College Board website?
Yes, thecollegeboard.com.
And does the FAFSA have an easy website? Is there a place to start and click through? Or
the FAFSA website is www.fafsa.ed.gov, and that's also on one of the flyers, I believe, that would be posted online. And they're both fairly easy programs to progress through in terms of entering the data. And you can enter half of the application and save and exit if you need to step out of it and do something else and come back to it. So you have that option with both forms.
Is there, when you're getting ready to do those forms online, is there paperwork besides the last paycheck that you should have with you, besides the last pay stub?
She's looking like all your paperwork.
Yeah, basically.
That's not true.
It depends. If the family only has to complete the FAFSA form, that's really a much condensed form from the profile. But you really should have your 2006 federal income tax returns, your W-2s for 2006, the value of your home, all of your assets, savings, checking, any stocks, CDs, retirement savings has to be listed now on the profile form. So you really should gather.
401ks?
Yes, yes. And then the profile form is a much more detailed form, again, because the colleges use that themselves for their own funding. So, if you gather all of that data, you might not need a couple of the pieces of documentation, but if you take a look at the websites, they tell you what to pull together before you complete the forms.
And they're basically looking for your total, net worth. It sounds like.
Yes.
That's what they want to know.
Yes, they are.
And,
they are.
But that's on the College Board profile as opposed to the FAFSA.
Yes, the FAFSA does not collect as much data as the profile does. The thing that stands out, I think, with most families is FAFSA does not collect anything on primary home. So they don't want the value of your home on that form. That was removed, I would say, almost probably 14, 15 years ago now, to address the concerns of middle class who had some equity in their homes, and it was really affecting their eligibility for financial aid. But the profile does gather that.
What about retirement income on the FAFSA? Is that
retirement is not on the FAFSA. It has finally found its way onto the profile. It's really in an informational gathering stage at this point. It's not being assessed as a contribution, but I think the private schools want to take a look at how, families have saved a lot in retirement. They might want to be taking a look at whether or not this family has the means to contribute a little bit more. But right now it's not being used in the calculation, but they do want those numbers.
That's really interesting. I did go to a financial aid night that was at Brandeis. It was a weekend that was done by the John Hopkins Center for Talented Youth, and at that time I thought that they had said that the house will not be looked at, and they don't expect you to take out an equity loan or anything like that.
Right.
But and the other big thing I think for a lot of people is debt. It's the recession. Well, all right, I won't say the R word. We're not in a recession, but we're all sitting here thinking, oh my goodness, how can I protect my job, protect my home? There's no provision for debt, right? Am I right in that? I had heard that they don't ask you if you have consumer debt.
No, they don't. The debt that they look at is the outstanding mortgage on your home. And that is primarily it. They don't look at consumer debt because that gets into how people choose to spend their money oftentimes. So if they begin to look at that, they could potentially be awarding people financial aid who were making poor choices in how to spend their money. So unless there's a situation where, people are putting medical bills on a credit card, they will look at those types of things. But consumer debt, car loans, they do not take a look at that.
And you did tell me, actually, that leads into something else you told me. I just pumped her for information
Good for
before we
you.
got there.
You did.
Good for you.
Because I wanted to get started immediately.
Yeah.
I didn't want to wait until we were filming, you know. But you also mentioned the concept of appeals letters if you do have, you know, high financial cost, or if you're, for example, supporting a relative, a parent, or something. And does that go with these forms?
I think the key to remember, number one, the profile form does have an area where you can actually type in comments. The FAFSA does not. So if you're a parent who has a school that is FAFSA only, if you've got any circumstances that are not addressed on the form, high medical expenses, for example, caring for an elder parent, you know, anything that you think that you would like the financial aid office to know about your family financially, I think it's best to put it out there and let them see if they can do something for you. I mean, they do read these letters, they look at them, and they try to do their best. So if you've got expenses, you know, as I said, that are not addressed anywhere, always send a letter to the financial aid office.
I actually know someone who just did this, who has a child who's, I don't know, 2 or 3 years into college, and whose financial situation changed. Got basically the same amount of financial aid, and did go back and deal with the financial aid folks at the college and got the award moved back up. So yeah, and I don't think I even knew that was possible.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's a great thing to keep in mind.
You know, I think people panic about making sure everything is accurate, and of course you want to make sure when you're entering the data on the forms that you are as accurate as you can be. But the key to remember is make those deadlines. Anything can be corrected after the fact, and communication with the financial aid office is key, because they are there, you know, really to address the needs and concerns of parents. So communication with them is very important.
I can remember being at Northeastern and working my way through college, and I think I had a tent at the financial aid office because whether it was work study, and I've been told this, I'll have to ask you as a financial aid advisor, I've been told that when you pick your schools, if you could really work hard to get yourself in the first year, because then you can pick up, you know, you can make yourself known, you can get on-campus jobs, you can. Is that something that you found to be true for families that are kind of on the line financially?
In terms of a work study job?
Well, in terms of you know, once you get in that first year, they're eager to, you know, if a student's doing well, if they're involved in the college community, they tend to try to find ways to help you, you know, stay there.
You know, it really, for financial aid, it is need-based. So you may receive a scholarship up front coming in as an incoming freshman based upon high school grades or GPA, you know, SAT scores, but primarily financial aid is need-based. They reassess every year so that you do have to reapply every year. But it is based upon the data on those forms. There's really, you know, unless the student picks up a scholarship from a specific department because he or she might be working there and they had some scholarship money, but for financial aid, it is need-based. With the data on those forms.
And we should explain that the FAFSA, the number that comes back to you from FAFSA, is basically what they believe you could contribute. Is that right? I'm kind of remembering.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you process your FAFSA and click submit, a confirmation page comes back immediately, and that's that number that you're talking about. It's a contribution number. I will caveat though and say that most families see that number
and freak out.
And it is it tends to be much higher than they had expected. You know, it's basically all of the data that goes on that form. It's similar to taxes. You know, there's a fairly complex calculation that all of these numbers are run through. And the final number is what the federal government feels that based upon your data on these forms, the student's income, assets, and the parents' income and assets, this is what you should be able to contribute. And most families, for most families, it is an unrealistic number, honestly.
So what's the next step then? And maybe at the same time you could address some of the, other than missing deadlines, are there common mistakes? I got to go, really, because I got
to go do these forms. You know, there are so many errors that families make on these forms. I think number one, because it's an intimidating process and you're putting all of your financial data out there, I really feel that if you slow down and read the directions and have your paperwork together, you should be okay.
It's true.
You know, their birth date, social security number, things like that, you have to be very careful with not, you know, entering something on the computer that's wrong, because there are matches with the Social Security Administration, and if your numbers don't match up, the whole form is slowed down.
Oh, okay.
So that's important in terms of just typing numbers in. People, you know, occasionally will type in the wrong number. But if you have, you know, I think for most parents going in this for incoming freshmen, you are estimating your income on these forms. The easiest way to do that is if your income stays consistent from year to year, pull out your 2006 federal income tax returns and use those numbers, and just, you know, take them from the tax return and enter them on the forms. And that really is the easiest, most accurate way to go about this year. Once the children are in school for sophomore, junior, and senior year, the deadlines usually fall back to where they do have time to complete their taxes before completing the financial aid forms. So then you're working with real numbers and you're not estimating anymore. But that's the difficult part for incoming freshmen, is you're really estimating all of the data.
Well, we're here in the third week of January, so even if you don't have your W-2s, you probably have your last pay stub.
Yes,
So,
yeah, for December.
And they're looking for your total income as opposed to, is like total gross income as opposed to your base pay or that kind of thing.
Yes, they're looking for gross income because there are deductions for taxes paid and FICA that is taken out when the calculations are performed behind the scenes. So they're looking for gross and then taking out all the taxes paid when they process those calculations.
I see. And I don't mean to be monopolizing here, ladies.
No, we
the
feel your panic. I feel it in waves coming across the table. I've been there.
Well, you had asked her also, that was two questions. What comes next then, after you see that number?
After you see that number, yes. And
you
thank
know,
you for not letting that get by.
Because really, that, I bet there are people out there going, what comes next?
Yep. What happens is, once the colleges receive the FAFSA and or the profile, they take those numbers and basically subtract those contribution numbers from the cost of attendance at those schools, and then the difference is what they can fund up to. So for example, if your contribution comes through on the FAFSA at $10,000 and the school costs $30,000, that family will have need for $20,000 in financial aid, and that's what the school tries to fund up to. And then, you know, once the forms are all in-house, the financial offices will calculate a package, send out the award offers, and, you know, families will need to then take those award offers and try to calculate what's the bottom line number they have to come up with to enroll their child at each of those schools that he or she has applied to. And then the decision from there is, where can we afford, and how are we going to pay for this?
And that financial aid can come in a number of forms. It doesn't just mean they're going to, it's an award, it's a check, it's a deduction. It could be a lot of things.
Yep, it's a package. It could be a combination of grants, loans, and college work study.
Right.
And typically it will be a combination of all three.
Is there a formula, even an informal one, that you work with when you're comparing your packages? Is there understanding that these young people are going to go into life with loans? They're going to start their real lives and their jobs with loans. Is there a percentage that you try to keep the loans to?
Well, the minimum that most schools will graduate owing in loans would be $19,000, and that is the absolute minimum. Most students will graduate with $19,000 in debt. They don't begin to pay most of them back until 6 months after they graduate, and it's about $230 a month. Beyond that, schools might offer, there's a variety of different loan programs. You know, I think families need to be really careful about having their children borrow too much, because then the challenge becomes, after graduation, how will they go out and support themselves?
Right, because they don't walk into that upper-level paying job right away. They have to work their way
that's
up.
the challenge. But really, honestly, $19,000 is the minimum in loan debt.
That 230 number is very helpful because it's, you know, a planning guide for what's going to happen afterwards. And it's about how long would you expect? I probably could do that on a calculator, but you're here,
repay.
So about how long to repay?
About 10 years.
About 10 years. So.
Yeah, it's set up to be repaid within 10 years. The students, if they run into financial trouble, they can extend that out. There are some safety programs within the student loan programs to allow for those types of challenges. But
And
for the most
mostly
part,
federal loans?
Yes.
And there are unsubsidized federal loans and subsidized federal loans and then
That might
private
be
loans, and it's a
complicated,
whole world
and we
out there.
have to probably say, now if you're getting to that point and you need that much detail, you might have to actually engage Jody's services. So see, we're giving you this for free, but that's not always the case. We talked about this. There's a range of what people, when people come to someone like yourself who has a lot of experience, it's like going to a tax preparer in a way, because they may be able to find more money in your deductions, and you may be able to help them. Well, first of all, just get rid of this panic thing, but secondly, to find other ways to increase, what their aid package, or to better assess what their aid package is going to be.
Right.
And then you told me a horror story, though, tell us about that, about how parents do need to be careful when they're choosing a financial advisor for college, for financial aid.
Well, I think there's an important distinction. A financial advisor is really an asset person to work with people's assets, but there are some companies out there who are offering financial aid assistance. I don't know them personally, but I have heard from clients that I've had and from families that there are some people who have paid $950 for financial aid help.
To just get started for the forms.
Yes. Well, I think that's for the, again, this is just from what I've heard, but that's really, a package deal. They'll process the forms and all of that. I guess my concern, or what I would ask for, would always be to ask for some references and to find out what their experience is in financial aid. I think my fear is that whether it's accounting or something like that, that people have realized that there's a market there out there for this type of assistance, and it's a panic thing for parents, and so they write the check just because they want they're relieved to have somebody to help them, and
and it's a broad range. If you can quell your panic and be confident, if you are comfortable with numbers, it's likely that you can go on to sites like the Massachusetts, it's MIFA, right? The
MIFA is
Massachusetts Education Financial
Authority.
Yeah. And I know they've done some, unfortunately in my town it was canceled for snow, but they've done some nights where they go and they talk to parents, and you could, at that end of the scale, you could be doing it yourself.
You could.
But, and then I think, I have no reservations. I said, so Jody, how much do you cost? So
put it right out there.
When you see clients, don't you think that's important?
Oh, absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
Looking at I can never remember buying anything, groceries or a car or anything, without looking at the price.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and you told me it was.
Yes, I charge $65 an hour.
$65 an hour, and it usually takes about, for the average family.
Yeah, people come right to my home, and for most people end up having to fill out the profile because there's always at least one or two public schools thrown into the mix. So to sit down and fill.
Public schools require the profile?
Private school, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay,
Pardon
sorry,
me.
I was confused.
For both forms to sit down and fill them out, and then most parents will opt to have me enter that data online. It's usually about 2 to 3 hours, and then people call me, really morning, noon, and night with questions, and I'm more than happy to answer those questions, and I don't charge for that. They call
Not like
up
the lawyers.
and say, right, no, I don't have, no, but, and I charge by the hour because some people need me for 2, some people need me for 10. So, that was what I arrived at, to be fair to everybody, to just bill for the time spent.
And I know that you do, for the community, you do free nights, and because I actually met you through one of the Barnstable High counselors who said, I can't do it right now, because they also are in the thick of this.
Right.
People can still come, but it's like tax time. Now's the time to do it.
Well, yeah, most financial aid nights at the high schools are held in December.
Right.
So that's one thing to watch out for. But I did want to mention really quickly, there is a free service for completing the FAFSA form, and it's sponsored from MASFA, which is the Massachusetts Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, and it's on January 27th, which is a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock at Cape Cod Community College.
Right.
And there will be financial aid professionals there actually helping people complete their FAFSA for free.
Great, and all of this information also is on our website. It's www.capecodonline.com/homefront. So please visit us there. And please join us again. Thank you so much for helping us through this maze.
My pleasure.
Please join us again next week for another episode of Homefront.